Hello, and welcome to this Christian Walk podcast, the show where no topic is too taboo to empower you on your walk with God. I'm your host, Marley B, and it's my privilege to welcome you back to season 6. TCW fam, I have invited a former NYC police officer to come join the discussion today about police perception in the community. I'm pretty sure you can gather that this is a deep conversation. So let's get into it right now.
Uh, we ain't talked in a minute, yo, please come kick it with me. I got some questions, need answers, so please be vivid with me. This walk is scary, I know that results may vary, but somebody gotta do it. Sit down, let's get into it.
Okay, Brother A. Smith, welcome to this Christian Walk podcast.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
I am so happy that you're happy because I surely am so privileged to have you on the show and to pick your brain and to have you share your story, your walk with us, right? But before we get into our conversation, which is an important one and a relevant one, I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself to the TCW fam.
Okay. Well, to start off, let's say I'm married 41 years to my wife, Mimi, and we have 2 adult children, Al Jr. and Tony. I have 4 grandchildren. I'm retired from the New York City Police Department. I've been retired now, I guess, 21 years. I was working during 9/11. I retired right after 9/11. Um, I just love and enjoy working and serving in the church, serving the community. I enjoy sports, and I also am an advocate for mental health. And I volunteer with an organization called NAMI. That's the National Alliance on Mental Illness.
Mhm. Definitely. From your perspective, right? You have had so many avenues. Like you summed up your life pretty, pretty um quickly there, but it's
Right.
so many facets, so many roads that you have traveled. And I can just imagine some of the things that you have witnessed, some of the things that you have been able to participate in, some that are some high moments and some probably you could perceive to be some low moments, right? But you've overcome them all and used them as this arsenal and this battery that is charging your will to serve God's kingdom, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's so many people that their experiences pull them away from God. So the fact that you've been able to travel the world, the roads that you travel and been through the things that you have experienced and still have this demeanor of just this, you just have this warm heart. You always are ready to offer this warm smile no matter when I see you. It's like even if you walking through praying, if I stop and wave to you, you would still stop and wave and give me that warm smile and keep on back to praying, right?
Yeah.
But that's just, it's like your experience fuel your faith. But as a person that was formerly a police officer, I can imagine you enduring some situations that challenged your faith. Can you say is that a fair assessment?
Yeah. Yeah. But I would say more so than challenge for me, situations like that strengthen my faith because as you go through, you
Hmm.
realize how you got through. You
Yes.
realize that at the end of the day, God never left me or forsake me. He was always right there. And having that foundation from a childhood, being raised as a person who knew to pray, was taught to pray by my mother at an early age, you
Hmm.
know. So that foundation has stayed with me my whole life.
Oh yeah. So you grew up in a faith fueled family, pretty much.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So how was that? Was that going to church? Was that are you a PK or were you guys just frequent attendees and you just have it in your blood? Some people just have it in your blood to be a part of a church, to be in it. So what did it look like for you?
Well, early on, didn't attend church a lot, but like I said, but early my mother taught us as children how to pray. And whenever something was going on, some tragedy in the family or something like I had a brother, older brother who was in Vietnam, and every time my mother got word, he was wounded 3 separate times.
Mm.
Okay. Um, every time she got word something was going on with him, she would just tell us, pray for your brother, pray for your brother. She would get us on our knees, and have us pray. And so, but church as a child, we went sporadically. We didn't go all the time,
Mhm.
but faith was still strong in the house, even though we didn't go to church all the time. And
Mhm.
as a teenager, when I played basketball, I played football. Sports kind of dominated, that time. So I didn't go to church that often during my teen years because of sports took precedence. And then
Mhm.
when I got older and left home, went to college, and got married, praise God, I married a woman of faith. So right after we got married, she would say, it's Sunday, can you take me to church? And so I would take her and drop her off and go home and put the game on and then come back and pick her up. And then eventually I stopped. I said, it wasn't that, church wasn't that long. So I started staying, you know, sitting with her through service and being under the word just, it just takes effect. Just being under the word, it takes effect. And the next thing I knew, I was a regular attendee. And then they asked me to teach
Mhm.
um, Sunday school. And I was like, Sunday school? Because they didn't have any men in Sunday school at my church in New York. So I said, well, I'll think about it. So Mimi encouraged me to do it. And I said, okay, I compromised. I said, I'll be a substitute. Whenever somebody's out, I will substitute. Of course, every Sunday somebody was out.
Right.
So,
We
so I
need you,
ended up,
brother Al. We need you.
yeah, so every Sunday, and eventually I ended up being superintendent of the Sunday school. And then I ended up being president of men's. I just, God just planted that seed and just it grew and I became totally, totally committed.
Wow. And then when you consider your time as a police officer, right? You were on the force 20 years.
Yeah.
You were on the force 20 years, NYC, right there on the front lines of 9/11. Um, and taking your foundation of faith as a was this during your time in the police or in the police force? Were you, coming up in the church during this time, or was this before, the superintendent having the Bible study happen? Was that before that or after?
This is all during that same time frame. So
Mm-hmm.
while I'm working for the New York City Police Department, I'm growing in the church at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It's overlapping.
Mm. And so when you finally decided to leave, right? How did you know it was the right time?
You mean when I retired?
Yeah, when you retired.
Okay.
Because you retired kind of early. Because you're still a young man now. You're still a little whippersnapper. You're still out here doing it now.
So, well,
So you definitely could have did more,
yeah.
more years if you
Well,
wanted to.
that I looking back, I see it
Mm-hmm.
was it was all God's plan, God orchestrated. But at the time, it was just me responding to this, what was in front of me. I was when I retired, I was actually working special assignment. I was working undercover. Um, how do I say this without telling too much detail?
I know, right? Oh.
Oh, so I was working. I guess the best way to say it is like organized crime with the
Mm-hmm.
crime families.
Mm-hmm.
You know, dealing with the construction business and stuff like that. And so I've been doing it like 4 years. I was undercover like 4 years. And I
Wow.
was told that it was going to be like, oh, it'll be a short, like a 6 month thing, it'll be over. That's what I was told before I agreed to go in. And so 4 years later, I'm still, living this life, with married, with children, and I'm living this like two lives.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted out, but they wanted the case to continue, even though I wanted out. And so they said, well, if if we let you out, we can't let you go anywhere. You can't be going out arresting people because somebody might see you. And there was the case is that big and all of this mess. And now, so one thing led to another. I said, you know what? I got my time, man. I'm just gonna retire. So I retired aggravated.
Oh, the aggravated retirement. Hey, whatever happens. Well, I feel like God knows, like you said, it was a God thing. It was one of those, it wouldn't have happened unless God allowed it. Right.
Right,
And so it definitely feels like it was just like your time to go to another chapter. Right. And we
right,
know you, and I appreciate and admire the fact that you embrace new chapters. Right. You didn't just sit there and say, oh, well, what am I going to do now? You went on to find other ways to serve, find other ways to serve not only the kingdom but the community,
right,
because I'm a firm believer that it's some jobs that, or careers, however you want to categorize it, it's not what you do, it's who you are. And I think
yes,
a police officer is one of those things, right? Police
yeah,
officers and people in the medical profession, that got to be in you, no matter whether you can do it because you got the license to do it or the badge to do it or not. That those characteristics are just a part of who you are. And that I can definitely say, I think it's definitely befitting from what I know of you, right?
right,
Now, when you, as a retired police officer, and you've been retired for 20 plus years now,
right.
and so I wonder, how do you feel about the perception of the police force nowadays?
Well, it ebbs and flows. Over my career, there were times when it was higher, and then there's times when it's low. I remember when I first came on the force in the '80s, they were killing cops like it was a game show. I was going to funerals like every other week, seemed like cop
Wow.
funerals, and we were hated. We were hated then. We went through that whole crack time, and um, so, and then after that, it kind of mellowed for a while, and the police, kind of seemed more acceptable to society. But with every, person being shot in the back or somebody, these more recent times, so putting the foot
Mm-hmm.
on the neck and all of that, it brings
Mm-hmm.
back all the negative stereotypes of the police. But what people don't realize is for every wrongful shooting or chokehold, there have been thousands upon thousands of encounters with the public with nothing going wrong, with somebody
Mm-hmm.
getting a ticket and going on their way, with somebody getting a warning, going on their way, somebody being handcuffed and taken to jail for the night, for the week, for the rest of their lives. And nothing goes wrong. I made more arrests than I could count where nobody ever got killed. you
Mm-hmm.
know, when I was affecting arrest. Now I've been in situations where people died, but I wasn't making an arrest.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but just thousands of encounters where nothing goes wrong.
So do you think the issue is just the sensationalizing of the media, or entering the information age? Everybody got a phone, everybody got a way to report things from their perception. Do you think that has something to do with it?
Well, the reality of it is it's multifaceted. There are racist cops. There are cops that abuse force, use too much force. Those things happen. And when it does happen, people have to pay the consequences. But we don't hate doctors because one doctor is drugging women and sexually abusing them. We say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this doctor was bad. We don't say all doctors are bad. When a teacher is abusing a child, we deal with that teacher. We don't say all teachers are bad. We deal with that teacher. Same thing with clergy. When clergy is out of line, okay, we get rid of him or her.
Mm-hmm.
We don't say, oh, cut the church off, defund the church. We don't get rid of the church. You know,
Mm.
so
Yeah.
the police department just needs to be treated like any other entity within society deal with the bad. Don't sweep it under the rug. Deal with the bad, and then move on. But I know we kind of wanted to talk about mental health, so I just want to tie this in my
Mhm.
police career with that. So when I joined the force, we used to use a terminology called EDP, emotionally disturbed person. So we would get a call that somebody was having a mental health crisis, and that was the terminology we used. And we would go there and try to safeguard the person and then remove them to the hospital. Okay, so I recall one time in particular. This is when I was on patrol, blue and white.
Mhm.
Me and my partner, we were working 4 to 12, and it was at the end of the night. And I think we had a party we were going to go to after the shift. So you think you get through the shift, you don't want to get an arrest or get something to tie you up if you want to do something after work, right? So
Right.
we get this call. I think it was a wellness call, if I remember. Go check on a person at this address. So we go to the address, ring the doorbell, and a young woman answers the door, and she seemed fine. She was a white woman, maybe in her mid to late 30s. She very polite. No, I'm fine. I don't know who called. Everything's good. We look around the house a little bit, just in the area where we were. Everything seemed fine. So we leave and we walking back to the police car. We get back to the police car, and my partner and I both look at each other. We said something's not right. We got to go. Now, this is our last call. We know we're not going to get another call,
Right.
unless crazy happens. We know that after this, we're going to our little party, whatever we had planned. I don't remember, it's so long ago. But we go back, and I ring the doorbell again. She doesn't answer. I ring it again. She doesn't answer. About the third time I ring the doorbell, she answers the door, and she's bleeding. She had cut her wrist,
Oh,
and she had written in blood on the wall like her little suicide note.
whoa.
So got a towel, put it on her wrist, put her in the police car, rushed her to the hospital, and she was fine. But that was like one of my early experiences dealing with somebody with a mental health crisis.
Mhm.
She just seemed a little too melancholy, too down. No, I'm fine. We just, I'll say Holy Spirit, because I was a
Yeah.
believer then too.
Yeah.
Let me know that something's not right. Go back and check. So,
Mm. And yeah, that's a great example because sometimes first of all, mental health illnesses have been something that was an issue in society for as far back as this country was founded, right?
mhm,
But for a long time it was just mental illness was something that was taboo. It was
hmm,
something that people just classified some people as crazy, and it wasn't. And it's so many nuances to that. You know that as a professional, right? We know that from seeing so many things play out as they've been pushing the conversation of mental health to the forefront because society is not allowing it to be suppressed any longer. The things that are
right,
happening are a lot of the time is a direct result of people having strain mentally, right? People are
right,
snapping, people are acting out due to uh generational childhood, all kinds of trauma, right? Traumas induced by stress and by just post-traumatic stress and
yeah,
all kinds of things. And so because the conversation has been able to be more of a headline, more of something that the media can no longer avoid the conversation or
right,
diminish it, right? So they kind of say that police are not trained to deal with it, but you clearly said that that's something that is that even back then that was a part of you guys' training, that that emotionally somebody could be classified, which means they need to be handled in a different way. There's a different
right,
procedure for that, right? Do
right.
you feel like, there should be an extensive, um, or, a more extensive training as it relates to mental health for police today, or do you think they
Definitely,
have
definitely.
enough?
No, no, definitely. And they do have something called CIT training, crisis intervention training. A
Mhm,
lot of the departments have it. I know Charlotte has it. They have part of that training is the police officers. It's like a week-long training that they go through where they visit mental health hospitals, they talk to patients, and there's the last day of training, there's a panel. And all of this is in conjunction with NAMI. There's a panel in the last day of training that they have professionals on the panel, they have people with mental illness on the panel, they have family members of those with mental illness, so supported. So I've actually been on the panel and spoken to the police officers being trained,
mhm,
sharing my experience as a police officer dealing with it and as a family member dealing with it. So during that panel, people share their experiences. Um, and the whole point is to make sure that the police see the person, as a family member, as a loved one, as somebody who's cared about, not as a perpetrator using police terminology or a criminal.
mhm, mhm,
So so people are told to ask for if there is a mental health crisis in your home, in your neighborhood that you're aware of that this person has a mental health issue and they're in an episode, to ask for when you call 911, ask for a CIT trained officer. So
mhm,
somebody's coming who has had the training and they know that they're going to a mental health situation. I know in New York City, the policies change with handling, we call them, like I said back then, EDPs, emotionally disturbed people. After a grandmother, her name was Eleanor Bumpus, I remember the name, remember the case. The police were called to the house for a domestic disturbance, and they go in, and she was wielding a butcher knife.
mhm,
So they
mm,
shot her and killed her. She was
wow.
like 70 years old, Black grandmother, in the project. And so it was a big, uproar. She's in her own home and all. So that's when they came up with a policy of isolate and detain. So if the person is acting in a way, if you can isolate them and detain them to that area, the police, we could back out, isolate and contain them, and talk them down. You don't have to
Mhm,
go in and, have a confrontation where you have to take a life. So
mhm,
that's when our whole policy changed, and that was in the early 80s.
mm. Yeah,
So, I
and
mean,
so go ahead.
yeah, I would just say, so this problem of dealing with emotionally disturbed people in extreme situations is not new. It's something that's always been, and better training helps. Um, Implicit bias is an issue. So because so many situations we'll say as people of color, well, if the
Mhm,
person was white, they would have found a way not to shoot him or not to
yeah,
kill him.
yeah,
People always say, well, why didn't they shoot him in the leg or shoot him in the foot? And the reason for that is you're not trained. You have to shoot the way you're trained. You're trained to shoot center mass. And
mm,
center mass is the biggest object you can see. If all I can see is your head, then I'm aiming center mass of your head. If I'm using deadly force, if I'm
mhm,
justified to use deadly force, if all I can see is your hand, then I'm shooting center mass at your hand. If all I can see is your foot, then, but mostly you see the person, and so you're aiming center mass, you're aiming at the chest. So
And
that's that's how you're
I've
training.
heard that there was I'm not sure how true this is or if it was true at one time, or and maybe not so true today, but hopefully you clear that up for me. I heard that police had a rule or guideline in place that says that shooting people in like the leg and the shoulder is like maiming them, and they can't do that. Is that true?
No, no, that's not true. Like I
Have you
explained,
heard that before?
no, you're
Ah,
trained to shoot center mass. Even in the military, they're trained to, because you want to hit them,
mm-hmm,
right? If you're shooting, you want to hit them because you want to stop them from doing whatever activity that's creating the danger. You're
mm-hmm,
trying to stop them from doing whatever they're doing.
mm-hmm,
So if I have your whole body in view and I aim for your leg, I'm more likely to miss. If I aim for your hand, I'm more likely to miss, which means I'm going to hit something that I'm not aiming at,
Mm-hmm.
which could be another person.
Right.
So you aim for the biggest target,
Mm-hmm.
because then you're more likely to hit the target.
Mm. Let me ask you this because you kind of touched on this a little bit and that gave me a nice little open door. But when it comes to being a black police officer, right? You hear these, sayings about you got to it's like black officers have to it's like you black and blue, right? You have to choose, they're choosing blue over black. And a lot of there's sometimes a lot of force or a lot of resentment for black officers because of that. I'm just a quick personal story, right? My dad was he passed away years ago,
Mhm.
but he had a best friend that became a police officer. My dad used to be a Black Panther. Him and his best friend became a police officer, and it was a rift between them for a long time
Mhm.
because he labeled him pretty much a traitor in his eyes, like
Mhm.
he's working for the enemy.
You're
But
working for the man.
right, he working for the man. You working for the enemy. You working for the man. How
Mhm.
could you do that? Is that something that you ever encountered? Because to me, like he chose to serve his community, but for some people, you're choosing another side. Did you see a lot of that in when you were on the force?
Yes, you do. Well, back when I was involved, yes, you did. But you know what wins over the day? Honor and integrity. Because let me
Mm-hmm.
tell you, when when they had a problem, guess who they called? They called me.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in the area where the the precinct was, I'm talking about the officers, was
Mm-hmm.
like 99% white. So there was only a few black officers. And of course, the neighborhood was all black and Hispanic and Indian, Asian.
Mm-hmm.
So, and some in the black community, they got to the point, once they got to know me, and I used to work study midnights. If they had a problem, they wouldn't call 911. They would call a precinct and ask for Officer Smith. And they would say, we can't guarantee you what officer you're going to send. They would say, if you ain't sending, they used to call me Smitty. If you ain't sending Smitty, don't send nobody.
Smitty. Oh, I'm definitely keeping that right here.
So
I'm keeping that right here.
that was the joke, at the brief. They, the a lot of the white cops would tease with me. They said, you personal police officer, people call you for personal service. And I would be thinking to myself, there's a reason for that. Because they
Mm,
know they're gonna be treated with dignity, honor, and respect, and not discounted and thrown away. I can tell you another story. There was an elderly white woman that lived in the area, right?
mm-hmm,
Where I patrolled. And she lived alone. She had a nurse that would, she, she had, I guess for certain hours, she would have her put her up sitting in front of her window. She liked to sit in the window and just look out the window,
mm-hmm,
before the nurse went off duty. And then the nurse would probably go off duty like around 8 or 9 o'clock, I guess, at night. And so I was working midnights then, and she would call the police every night around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning for us to pick her up and put her to bed.
What?
Yeah, call the police to do that, right? So again,
Y'all win?
I'm a rookie working on the midnights, right? So I get the call. The first time I get the call, I don't know nothing about this, right? So I go, you get the call as a person needing assistance. That's how the call
Mm-hmm,
came in. So I get the call, get there, and she's fine. She said, oh, the officers, they'll put me to bed at night. So she's small, tiny woman. So I pick her up, carry her to bed, put her to bed, say good night, lock her door, because she leaves her door unlocked, you know, lock her door and leave. So this goes on a few times. I don't always get the call. Whoever has that area, because my area of patrol would be different on different nights.
mm-hmm,
So I sometimes I would hear the call. It got to a point where I would hear the call come over, and whoever got the call a lot of times would say, um, Central, that's what we call the radio dispatcher. Central, that's a chronic call. It's not a police matter, and dismiss the call.
Mm-hmm.
But they wouldn't go help her. So when I would hear that, if I wasn't doing anything, I would tell Central, I'll take the call. Don't worry about it. And I would go put the. Now this was a white woman.
Mm-hmm.
The white cops would not. I mean, if you're not busy, we still serving the public. I
Right.
The black cop would go put her to bed at night and lock her door. And
Wow.
that's just one experience of having a servant's heart and knowing that you took a servant's job and know that's not a police call, but we're there to serve.
To serve. Absolutely. Okay, so disclosure. I want to make sure that nobody that is out there that got a crush on a officer is not going to request to be tucked in. Please don't do that because that was something that was special and that was back in the day. We're not doing that now. So please don't pick somebody to tuck you in and try to get a call dispatched. If you would please refrain from that. But when you think about um and we're talking about the level of um mental health training, what about mental health support for officers, right? Because I feel like a lot of the situations that a lot of these officers get themselves in as a result of them not being properly screened. I feel like if there should be some kind, if you are racist so bad that you would be doing something blatantly that is, I mean, like a lot of these people have like a record of doing things to people of color sometimes, right? And it's like, how is that not detected? How is this somebody not saying, hey, let's sit you down and see what your problem is? Do you think that there's a lapse there in the screening of people, from the beginning, but then throughout their careers too?
Well, historically, there is. You know what? You screen for things that are important to you, right?
Yeah.
So is protecting the black community and that historically high on the list of priorities? If you're a little racist, but you score high on the test and you're a good shot and you're physically fit and your other moral character seems okay,
Like
you know,
if you're a little racist or if you just a homicidal maniac.
well,
Like
that's
it's
different. No, not homicidal maniacs. No, 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 no. That would trigger.
support killers.
No, that would trigger. They would not. That's not sliding through. But
Oh,
a little racist, yeah, that'll slide.
you
That's not
probably
high on the list.
yeah, I get that. If you're a little racist. Okay, so
Yeah,
then
that's
you
not high on the list.
yeah, and then
Historically, it might
right.
be higher today, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm going back, you know, when I started in police work, I'm going back to the early 80s.
So and it's like that might be, I mean, the racist test got to be, I mean, it got to be a test that's easy to cheat on. Like it's like, okay, do you hate, well, how you screen that and really find out? Is it possible to screen something like that? If
Well,
it
with
could
the psychological test, they ask you questions. I mean, the test now is like 500 questions, and they ask you a lot of different questions in
Mhm,
different ways, but it's the same question, and they can look at the pattern of how you answer questions to
mhm.
pick up, psychological things like that. So it's
Okay.
hard to. It's not like, do you hate black people? Oh
Yes.
no. Do you hate Hispanics? No. Do you hate Puerto? It's not like that. It's a lot of subjective questions asking a lot of different ways, and then they look at the pattern of how you answer, and then they can pick up those biases. But it's not a disqualifier. Like I said, it's
Mm,
not high on the list.
And so, or it's because basically unconscious bias is not high on the list,
Yeah,
is what you're saying.
right, right. It's not
Conscious or unconscious, really.
right.
Okay. So when you think about, and we talked about patrolling neighborhoods, right? Like you
Mhm.
said, in that precinct you were with, it was like 99% white.
Mhm.
Do you feel, how do you feel about people being able to patrol neighborhoods that they don't necessarily interact with unless they're on patrol? Like I heard that, you know, I think it was a comedian. Who was that? I think that was Chris Rock. I heard him say like, he believed, you know, and of course this was a comedy show, but you know, he'd get to being a real orator during his
Mhm.
shows, and he brought up a good point to me about police probably shouldn't be allowed to patrol neighborhoods that they don't live in. What you think about that?
Well, there's another side to that question. If you're
Mhm.
patrolling neighborhoods you do live in, there's more likely nepotism, favoritism.
Mm.
You know, are you going to arrest the guy you went to high school with? Are you going to arrest the captain of the football team, the basketball? Are you going to remove him and now he can't play Sunday or Saturday or what?
Hmm.
You know,
That is
the
so true.
backlash from the neighborhood. Are you going to
I didn't even think
so
about that aspect.
so there's a whole nepotism that goes with patrolling your neighborhood.
Hmm.
People that you like, they get a free pass, and the people that you don't like, they better not spit on the sidewalk.
That
So
is that's true. Okay. Well, what about outreach? Like, I feel like if nothing else, police that patrol neighborhoods, whether they live in them or not, it like to see more police in our neighborhoods doing something to get to know the community. Do you think that is that done and it's just not publicized, or
yeah,
do you
it
think
is.
that that need to be done?
There was a whole move in that area in the late '80s, early '90s called community policing. It started in Houston, Texas, where they had community police officers. New York City incorporated, and you had an officer who would walk the foot post, and it was his job. They made it part of your job description to get out and meet the people in the community, meet the store owners. You had to get names. You had to document who you spoke to, how long. Even the police cars that patrolled, we had 1 hour where you had to park your car, and they called it park, walk, and talk, where you had to park the police car. And for that hour, you had to walk and talk to the community people in a block where you would park. Now, if an emergency happened, of course, you had to leave that and go handle a call. But the other
Mhm.
cars would get the calls in your section while you did your park, walk, and talk. So they've done all of that. They've tried all of that, and it helps a little. It helps a little. But what you really have to do is you really have to get people who have a heart for service. If my heart's not in it, I can go through the motions and I ain't
Mhm.
helping nobody. I ain't looking out for nobody. And half of the cops don't even want to arrest anybody. You think police want to lock people up? They don't want to arrest anybody. Half of them don't want to do anything but collect their check and go home.
It's just you know, and you hear about so many police officers who go their whole career never pulling their gun, never shooting their gun. You don't hear about that too often.
Yeah. And that's what you want to do. You don't
Yeah,
want to. If you can go home and you didn't shoot nobody and nobody shot you, that's a good day.
that's a good day. Yeah, like I didn't have to shoot nobody. Cue Ice Cube
And
because
nobody shot
today
me.
Cue Ice Cube because today was a good day.
Yeah, that's a
Hmm,
good day.
that's a good day. And so if you had to if you were able to incorporate one thing that you think that could help the perception of the police force, what would it be?
I think um, that's a really good question. That's a tough question, but I think is just seeing the police in their other roles, seeing a police officer as a son
Mm.
with his mom, with his dad, seeing a police officer as a brother with his sister or his brother, seeing a police officer as a father with his children, you know, seeing the human side. So, because when you have a family member who's a police officer, it's a totally different picture. When somebody you love and care about as a police officer, it's a totally different picture. I remember when I was on the force, like I said early on, cops was getting shot left and right. And so my mother was a nervous wreck all the time. Every time she hear on the news a cop was shot or this. So I told my mother, which was not true, but I told her, when you hear it on the news, the family's already been notified. So
Mm.
you would have been notified if it was me. That wasn't true, but that was the only way I could put her mind at ease.
Yeah.
So that when she heard it, it's not Al because he said I would have been notified already.
Did she ever find out the truth? Oh,
No,
this.
I never told her that. No, she passed believing that if it
Mm-hmm.
would have been me, she would have been notified, hearing it on the news.
Mm. Well,
But that
I
it made her be able to sleep at night.
yeah, I mean, because what I mean, that is a nerve-wracking thing because and usually being a police officer could not be pretty much really compared to being a soldier, but
Mhm.
now it can
Yeah,
because there's like this. It's like this war that's happening. Do
yeah.
you feel
Well,
like is
like I
is
said,
that the case?
it's ebbs and flows. It's ebbs and
Hmm.
flows. There's times when it's pretty routine being a police officer, and then there's times when it's hunting season. Like
Yeah,
I remember a
yeah.
few years ago. I mean, since I've been retired, a few years ago, I would say about 4 or 5 years ago, before the pandemic, right before the pandemic, it was open season on the police. They were shooting them left and right all around the country, and then it died down again.
Hmm.
Remember
And
the shooting in Texas? The guy with the assault rifle in Texas, he
yeah,
was
I
shooting,
remember that.
just shooting cops.
And it's like just having on the uniform makes you a
Is
target.
enough.
It
Is
makes you a
enough.
target, and that's something that it changes a person. You have to. You can't just turn. Turn that off. Can you? Like, you feel like? Did you just feel like you were a target at any point?
Never. I was always able to. When I got off duty, I turned the job off. I'm off. I'm done.
Yeah, well, that's good because a lot of people can't do that working in the office. And
Yeah.
for you, but that just shows once again your character, shining through there, because some people, they just can't escape it. But that just shows that, we need to take advantage of the things that are the resources available
Right.
to help ease those kind of resentful feelings, those fearful feelings, right? And do you think that there's a lot of resources out there for police that they don't take advantage of,
Well,
or do you
I'll
think they
say,
need more resources?
okay, historically, it was taboo to say anything. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was working in anti-crime at this point. So that's plain clothes, doing patrol, an
Mm-hmm.
unmarked car. And one of my anti-crime sergeants, he somebody had just recently committed suicide. A cop had recently committed suicide. And so we come into the office, and there's about maybe 5 or 6 of us in the office, right? And we're talking about this recent cop suicide. And everybody's, well, I really don't see how you could do that. And the sergeant says, well, I don't see what you guys don't understand. It's very simple. You take the gun, and he took his gun, you put it to your head, and he put his gun to his head, and he said, and you say bang. And everybody's looking at him like, whoa, did he just do that?
Yeah,
But we didn't take it serious. We said he just was being an expletive, okay?
yeah.
And we dismissed it. Okay. There was one girl in the unit at the time. Her name was Sue. And she was real good friends with another female who was a lieutenant who was very connected in the department. They
Mm-hmm.
were good friends. So evidently, Sue mentioned it to her lieutenant friend
Mm-hmm.
who reported it. Come to find out, the sergeant, he hadn't been in that precinct that long. He had been there maybe 2 years at the time. And he had been involved in a shooting in the precinct where he came from. And because of that shooting he was involved in, he had gotten depressed. And so he had a mental health history with being depressed about a previous shooting. So when he did that and they reported, they flagged it, and they came in, they took his guns, and they put him on modified assignment. So he was so mad, like, who could have done, who could have reported it? And when everybody thought about it, they thought about the one person who wasn't, quote unquote, one of the guys, one of the boys who
Right.
was there when he did it was Sue and her relationship with the lieutenant that worked at Midnights. And they figured out that that's kind of how it went. She told the lieutenant, and the lieutenant reported it, and it flagged him because he had this history. So he was sat down, I want to say a year, maybe two, because I got transferred to narcotics before he got back on patrol. But he was sitting behind the desk just on desk duty for like a year or maybe longer.
So when you do modified assignment, do they make you get some kind of mental health treatment?
Oh yeah, he was getting counseling and all of that. He was doing all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But he was saying there was nothing wrong. He was just, just being flippant. But because he had that history and it was documented, they took it very seriously.
Yeah, so you're saying that because resources are there, but people have to take advantages of it. Take
Well,
advantage
here's
of
the
it.
other, but when you feel like you're being penalized for saying something, then are you going to say anything? Is it going to stunt my career?
Mm,
Now I'm not going to get promoted. Now I can't, do all the things. I can't be in the special unit now. Now he's back in uniform, sitting behind a desk. When before he was the sergeant of a plainclothes unit and unmarked cars and the freedom to go and come like we wanted to and work and move. That's he
mm,
lost all of that.
wow. With no, and basically now you have that stigma on you.
Right. Now everybody in the new precinct thinks, oh, he's a whack job, what the terms that they use. I mean, I got so many stories. I had a guy that we played on the police department basketball team. We had a basketball team, right? And we used to play games against college teams, against we would do benefits, tournaments, all we had the police Olympics, the National Police Olympics, and we would, I've been to Canada and all over the place playing basketball for the police department. So one of the guys who was on the team with me, he committed suicide. And
Mm,
at the time that he committed suicide, Dinkins was the mayor, right? David Dinkins was the mayor,
mm-hmm,
first black mayor of New York City.
mm-hmm.
And his job was to drive Dinkins' wife. He was Dinkins' wife's personal, driver and like bodyguard. That was it.
Right.
So he had like one of the sweetest jobs you could have on the department, right? But he was depressed and he had some issues in his personal life and maybe some ghosts and things that had happened in the past that one day he went home and he shot himself. So I mean, it's
It's so
this
many
mental
things.
health thing.
Yeah.
It's
It,
real. I
it,
got, like I said, I got so many stories of guys
I'm
that I know
sure.
personally,
I'm sure, Al. Like,
that have
and then
gone
so
through
one.
this and committed suicide. And
Yeah. And when we think about the people in our lives, right? Whether we're a part of the police force, when we're just dealing with our own family members, right? A part of your job with Nomi, right? Is
um,
yeah, with Nami is, you help people to identify
right,
the signs when it
right,
comes to mental health. And I
right.
think
What to
so
look
many of
for.
us dismiss the signs,
Well,
right?
here's an easy one. Okay,
Mhm,
teenage years, right? Teenage years. Teenagers are moody. They get quiet. They spend a lot of time in their room. They isolate. Because they're moody.
mhm.
So how do you know when they're just going through normal teenage changes, or there's actually something else going on? You have to actually sit down with your kids and have conversations so that you can find out, are they saying anything that clues you in that this is not a normal moodiness, there's something more going on.
Mm-hmm.
Are they seeing things or they hearing things that are not, that everybody else is not seeing and hearing? And you only find that out by having actual conversations, actually listening to what they're saying, and not being in the mindset of just, I'm parenting them and, disciplining, or ignoring them. They're just a pain. And they're in their room good. Let them
Yeah,
stay in there
right.
because they
If
don't
we
want to go.
generalize, oh, that's just a teenage. He's just being a teenager. She's
Right.
being just being a teenager.
So you have to be intentional about paying attention for the clues that there's something else going on. And it's so important. The earlier you catch things, generally the better the outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important. And while we're on that note, it's very important to support the families going through, because if somebody has cancer, right? Oh, so and so's got cancer. Oh, or somebody's got a kidney problem. Oh, they got a kidney problem. Somebody was in a bad car accident. Oh, they was in a bad car accident. We take food over there. Oh, how they doing? We come. Nobody rings your doorbell and brings you a meal because your son has mental illness and he's in the hospital.
Wow.
Nobody, or your husband or your wife, because they're in a. Nobody assists, help, you know. Oh, go to the hospital, spend time with your husband. We'll stay with the kid. Nobody does that. Everybody stays away.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an illness of support, generally speaking. A lot of times you can't even get support from the family. Oh, there's nothing wrong with that boy. It's the parents. They blame the parents. Oh, that boy is fine. Why they acting like something's wrong with him? So it is really, um, people really have to be educated, and NAMI is one of the places where you can get trained how to take care of yourself, how to get support, how to support each other, because there are support groups where family members can come together. And it's a place of no shame, because now you can share what you're going through with somebody else going through the same thing.
Yeah, if somebody wanted to reach out to Naomi, how can they do it?
You can just they're online. They have them in every state.
And what's the
There's
website?
affiliates. Yep.
What's
NAMI
what's the
Charlotte.
website?
NAMI Charlotte. Yep.
NamiCharlotte.org.
Yep.
Yeah, I want to be able to tell the people so they'll
Yes.
know.
And my wife and I started a new ministry at the church called Breaking Barriers.
Mhm.
Okay. It's at New Beginnings Church, Breaking Barriers. And we are attempting to bring the people who are dealing with mental health challenges together, because they get isolated too.
Yeah.
They don't have friends. They sit home. They don't do anything. So we have events. We bring them out, get them into the community, and have a good time. So we're targeting 18 to 40, the young people, just like the Unplugged Ministry group, that age group,
Yeah.
that same demographic.
Yeah.
And we just want and support the family. The family can come. We have events, and we just go out. We have a good time. We interact, and we integrate them into the community. We go to football games. We go to jazz concert. We just do a lot of different things. Just get them out in the community and not be isolated, especially since the pandemic. So many people are isolated, even people not with
Yes.
mental health challenges. So
Yes.
imagine the ones with mental health challenges, how they are being isolated.
Absolutely. And then people can learn more about the Breaking Barriers on the church website.
Yes,
Okay. So that's NBCministries.org.
yes.
So please reach out. Don't do not allow the stigma of getting help for mental illness stop anyone from reaching out there. Al, thank you so much for coming on the show today. This has been very enlightening. Thank you for your ministry. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your whole life and for sharing your Christian walk with us.
No problem. It's been a pleasure being here. And you talk about my smile. You have a beautiful smile, and you always brighten up the church when you're walking around doing your thing, serving like you serve.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'm gonna have to get you back on here one day too to talk
Okay.
more about your program.
All right. Sounds
All
good.
right. That's what's up.
3, 2, 1.
Thank you so much to my guest, Brother Al, for joining the conversation and sharing your experience as well as your perception as a former police officer about the perceptions going on today. I mean, truly, we got a perspective that we rarely get from someone who actually had the uniform on and understand the mindset of someone in those situations. Really appreciate that. And if this conversation spoke to you, please like it, share it, comment. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Remember, you can stream the show on Apple Podcasts as well as iHeartRadio. And don't forget to check out our new website, thischristianwalk.com. Well, TCW fam, what I don't want this conversation to be perceived at is a way to negate the fact that a lot of people with badges and authority should not have them. Right? The fact remains that so many people have lost their freedom and their lives behind crooked police. But what I don't want to perpetuate is what social media and, mainstream media want us to think, that all police are bad. That's just not true, because the fact remains that there are many men and women that suit up every day in those uniforms with the intent to protect and serve. And they also hope to get home safely to their families. And so I'm hoping that this conversation and this perspective will help you to consider that these people are not just authority figures, they're not just cops, they're not just people out here trying to hold us down. They're people's mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers and daughters and sons. And we should not allow offense to stop us from wanting the best for them, for praying for them, because they need prayer just like us. And on this walk with God, I know one thing for sure. Loving God can be easy. Trusting God can be hard. But I believe we can all get there one step at a time on this Christian walk. I'll see you next time.
We ain't talked in a minute, yo, please come kick it with me. I got some questions, need answers, so please be vivid with me. This walk is scary, I know that results may vary, but somebody gotta do it. Sit down, let's get into it.